Have you ever wondered why some people can walk into a room and instantly change the energy around them? Why men who pride themselves on strength, control, and logic sometimes feel powerless in front of certain women without even understanding why? This is not about looks alone. It's not about status or wealth. It's about something deeper, something rooted in human psychology and timeless truths that govern how we connect, how we desire, and how we give away our power. From the beginning of time, men have been shaped by forces beyond their control. History tells us stories of empires built and destroyed, not just by the strength of armies, but by the influence of a single person who knew how to command attention without raising a weapon. And here's the shocking part. The same patterns that guided kings, warriors, and leaders throughout centuries are still alive today. They live inside human nature, inside the unseen laws that pull men toward women who carry certain qualities. This might leave you with questions. What makes these women so powerful? Why do men who fight to master everything else in their lives often surrender when it comes to this kind of influence? And more importantly, what can men learn from this so they do not fall blind but rise stronger? These are not small questions, and if you stay with me until the end of this video, you'll uncover answers. That will not only open your eyes, but also give you the keys to grow in ways you never thought possible. Because here's the truth. Understanding this hidden power is not about fear. It's about awakening. It's about seeing what is usually invisible. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. That is the reward of listening closely. The ability to step out of unconscious patterns and step into conscious strength. Now, let's step deeper. Men often think they choose who they are drawn to, but the reality is more complex. Attraction is not born in the mind, it is born in the instincts, in the wiring of the human brain. Studies in psychology and biology show us that men are unconsciously influenced by signals of confidence, harmony, and presence. A woman who embodies these signals doesn't have to speak loudly or demand attention. She doesn't need to fight for it. She simply is. And men respond, not because they want to, but because they are built to. Think about it. Strength alone does not create influence. Force may win battles, but influence wins hearts, and hearts determine destinies. When a man encounters a woman who carries an aura of certainty, grace, and power, something shifts inside him. His rational mind takes a step back, and his deeper instincts move forward. It is the same instinct that drives him to seek purpose, to build, to conquer. Yet here, that instinct is not his own to control. It is being guided, often without his awareness. But here lies the important lesson. This kind of power is not manipulation. It is magnetism. It is the reflection of order, beauty, and meaning. Men who fall under its influence are not weak. They are human. And to be human is to be vulnerable to forces greater than logic. Now imagine what this means for your own life. If you are a man listening, this awareness can change everything. Instead of stumbling blindly into patterns you don't understand, you can rise above them. You can recognize the forces at play, and instead of surrendering unconsciously, you can engage consciously. You can choose growth, discipline, and strength, not because you resist influence, but because you understand it. And if you are a woman listening, realize the power you carry. It's not about appearance alone. It's not about playing roles. It's about cultivating qualities that awaken strength in others. The ability to inspire, to guide, and to shape is already inside you. It only needs to be awakened. But remember this, power in any form is double-edged. It can be used to uplift or to destroy. And that is why this journey matters. By staying until the end, you will discover not only why men feel powerless in front of women like this, but also how both men and women can turn this truth into a path of transformation. A path that leads not to weakness, but to strength, not to fear, but to freedom. So stay with me, because what you're about to discover is not just about attraction, not just about influence. It's about the very core of human connection. And if you listen carefully, you'll walk away with a clarity that few ever find. When we look closely at the forces that shape human connection, one truth stands out. Men are drawn not only to beauty, but to the harmony behind it. Beauty, in its deepest sense, is not just about appearance. It is about order. It is about the balance between chaos and structure. It is the quiet message that says, here, life makes sense. And men who battle the storms of uncertainty every single day are naturally pulled toward this. Think about it. A man's life is often filled with struggle, work, responsibility, the weight of proving himself. Inside, he longs for peace, for a place where the storm can rest, When he encounters someone who carries order, someone who embodies harmony, it speaks to his deepest instincts. He feels drawn, not because of surface attraction alone, but because he sees in that presence a reflection of what he himself is searching for. This is why beauty has always held power, but not beauty in the shallow sense, not just features, not just style. True beauty is the radiance of inner strength combined with grace. It is the kind of presence that brings calm instead of chaos, confidence instead of fear, clarity instead of confusion. A man who experiences this feels a pull he cannot explain. His rational mind may search for reasons, but his instincts already know. Psychology tells us that human beings are wired to seek patterns. The brain craves order because it creates safety. When life feels unpredictable, when everything seems uncertain, order becomes irresistible. And this is the secret behind why men fall under the influence of certain women. They sense order in her. They feel a clarity that they cannot create alone. And in that moment, they lean in, often without realizing why. But here lies the real insight. Order and beauty do not compete with strength. They enhance it. A woman who brings both does not diminish a man. She awakens him. She reminds him of what he is fighting for. She draws him out of his confusion and into his higher self. This is not control. It is inspiration. It is the kind of influence that pushes him to rise, to refine himself, to become more disciplined, more focused, more alive. History is full of examples where men found their greatest strength not in isolation, but in response to the presence of someone who carried this harmony. Wars were won, books were written, empires were built, not just by willpower, but by the spark lit in the presence of order and meaning. That spark is still alive today, working in the same way, driving men to become more than they are. But let us pause here. Why is this power so difficult for men to resist? The answer lies in the human condition itself. Our men are builders, protectors, seekers, yet deep down they wrestle with chaos, the chaos of the mind, the chaos of the world. A woman who embodies balance gives form to what they chase endlessly, but cannot fully grasp. It is as if she carries a mirror of their highest potential, and in seeing it, they are drawn closer, powerless to walk away. This is not weakness, this is nature. It is the same principle that draws us to music, to art, to anything that reflects harmony. We do not choose to be moved, it simply happens. Our biology, our psychology, our very souls are aligned with the pursuit of order. And when a man finds it in another person, the effect is profound. Yet there is a warning here. The attraction to order and beauty can blind as much as it can guide. Men who are unaware may fall not into growth, but into dependence. They may confuse inspiration with salvation, forgetting that no one else can complete them. Awareness is the key, to recognize the influence, to admire it, but also to stand in strength beside it. For women, the lesson is equally powerful. True beauty is cultivated, not just displayed. It is not about perfection, but about alignment, living in a way that brings harmony to self and to others. Confidence, kindness, resilience, these are the elements that radiate far beyond appearances. They are the signals men respond to, consciously or unconsciously. So the truth becomes clear. Order and beauty are not just qualities, they are forces. Forces that shape destinies, that inspire greatness, that move men to act in ways they cannot fully explain. And in this dance between attraction and growth, we see a reflection of the deepest human desire, the search for meaning, for purpose, for harmony in the midst of chaos. This is why men are powerless in front of women who carry these qualities, not because men are weak, but because they are wired to respond to what gives life structure. They see in her what they strive for themselves. They feel in her presence the balance they crave. And in that recognition, they surrender. Not in defeat, but in longing for something greater. And this longing, if guided with awareness, becomes transformation. For in the pull toward order and beauty lies the potential for men to rise higher, to sharpen their vision, to live with greater purpose. And that, perhaps, is the deepest truth of all. Influence is not about who speaks the loudest. It is not about physical strength, status, or control. Influence is something far deeper. It works in silence. It lives in gestures, in tone, in presence. And when it is mastered, it becomes almost invisible. Yet its effect is undeniable. Men who face this kind of influence often find themselves shifting their actions, their decisions, even their sense of self, without ever realizing they have been moved. Psychologists call this the power of subtle cues. Human beings respond more to what is felt than to what is said. A calm voice lowers defenses. A steady gaze builds trust. A gentle word at the right moment changes direction more effectively than 1,000 commands. And here lies the truth. Women who understand this do not need to push. They guide, they shape. They create movement not by force, but by presence. Think about the last time you were around someone who carried certainty. You could feel it. It wasn't in their words alone. It was in the way they stood, the way they breathed, the way they held space. That feeling changes the way people act around them. Men, in particular, respond to this kind of presence on a level that goes beyond reason. Because men are conditioned to notice signals of confidence and direction, they instinctively lean toward those who carry it. But there is another layer here, one that runs deeper. Influence works because it speaks directly to the unconscious. Our conscious mind can argue, resist, or deny. But our unconscious mind is always listening. It picks up patterns, tones, rhythms, emotions. And when those signals align, they bypass logic and strike the heart. This is why men may say they are in control, yet their choices reveal something else. They are being moved, not by force, but by invisible threads of psychology. For example, emotional intelligence is one of the strongest forms of influence. To see beyond words, to read what is not being said, to understand the emotion behind the action. This creates a power greater than physical strength. When a woman responds with understanding rather than reaction, it disarms. When she listens instead of arguing, it changes the entire outcome. And when she uses that understanding to guide, she holds a form of influence that men find nearly impossible to resist. Now consider the principle of reciprocity. Human beings are wired to return what they are given. When someone gives us kindness, we feel an obligation to respond. When someone offers trust, we want to prove it right. Men respond powerfully to this law. A woman who gives respect, even in small ways, awakens in a man the need to give back even more. This exchange is subtle, yet it can transform relationships, decisions, and even futures. Another hidden force of influence is consistency. Men by nature respect discipline. When they see it in someone else, it challenges them. A woman who carries consistency in her actions, who says little but delivers much, creates a deep psychological impact. It forces a man to measure himself, to rise, to align with the standard she sets without demanding it. And yet the most powerful form of influence is not in words or actions alone. It is in belief. When someone believes in you truly and deeply, it awakens a fire inside. Many men achieve their greatest victories not because they believed in themselves first, but because someone else did. A single voice saying, "I know you can," has built more empires than armies ever have. This belief, when genuine, becomes an unstoppable influence. But influence is not about control. It is about alignment. True influence does not enslave. It awakens. It does not weaken. It strengthens. A woman who wields this kind of influence is not taking away a man's power. She is awakening it, drawing it out, shaping it into something greater than it was before. This is why men are powerless in the face of such influence. Not because they are diminished, but because they are called to rise. Yet, with every great force comes a warning. Influence can inspire, but it can also manipulate. The same psychological truths that uplift can also trap. Men who are unaware may give away their direction, surrender their vision, and lose themselves in the process. That is why awareness is crucial. To see influence clearly is to protect oneself from its shadow while embracing its light. So what does this mean for men? It means that to resist influence is impossible, but to understand it is essential. Once you recognize how it works, you are no longer blind. You can accept it when it uplifts you, but guard against it when it pulls you into weakness. And for women, the message is equally profound. The way you use influence defines the legacy you leave. You hold the ability to shape, to guide, to awaken greatness, but it must be wielded with wisdom, with care, and with integrity. Influence is invisible power. It works quietly, but it moves mountains. It is the reason why men surrender without even realizing the reason. Why choices are altered, paths are redirected, and lives are changed. And when we understand it, we do not fear it. We use it to grow, to rise, and to build something greater than ourselves. Confidence is magnetic. It draws people in without effort, without demand, without noise. And when it is real, when it is rooted deep within, it cannot be ignored. Men in particular are pulled toward it with a force that feels almost unshakable, because confidence represents certainty, and certainty is something every human heart longs for. Why does confidence hold such weight? Because life is uncertain. Most men walk through their days carrying doubt about their future, doubt about their worth, doubt about whether they are enough. And when they encounter someone who radiates certainty, it cuts through the fog. It feels like a light in the darkness, a steady flame that refuses to be shaken by the storms around it. That presence becomes irresistible. Confidence does not speak with arrogance. True confidence is calm, steady, and unforced. It does not need to prove itself, it simply exists. And that is why it feels so powerful. Arrogance demands attention, but confidence attracts it. Arrogance is loud, but confidence is quiet strength. And men are wired to notice the difference. They may resist arrogance, but they surrender to confidence. From a psychological perspective, confidence signals value. Human beings are constantly measuring social cues to determine who holds strength, who holds stability, and who can be trusted. Confidence communicates all of this in a single glance, a single movement, a single word spoken without hesitation. A woman who embodies this quality tells the world, "I know who I am, and I do not need permission to be it." That message penetrates deeper than beauty, deeper than charm. It is identity, fully owned, fully alive. Men are especially vulnerable to this signal because it speaks to their core struggle. Every man is on a journey to prove himself, to establish his worth in the eyes of the world. When he sees someone who already embodies that certainty, he cannot look away. It awakens admiration, longing, and sometimes even envy. But above all, it awakens attraction. Because deep down, he knows that kind of confidence can guide him toward his own. But confidence is not built overnight. It is not an act, not a mask. It comes from battles fought in silence, from overcoming doubt, failure, rejection, and fear. It comes from standing up after being knocked down again and again. That is why it feels so powerful when it is real, because it carries the weight of struggle, the history of resilience. And men can sense this without being told. They feel it. They see it in posture, in tone, in the way someone moves through the world. Now consider the effect this has on influence. Influence without confidence is fragile. It crumbles under pressure. But influence with confidence becomes unstoppable. A calm word carries more weight than a loud shout when it is backed by conviction. A simple choice becomes inspiring when it is carried out with certainty. And a presence grounded in self-worth changes not just how others see you, but how they see themselves in your presence. This is why men find themselves powerless around women who embody confidence. It is not about domination. It is about gravity. Confidence is like the pull of the earth. You don't choose to respond, you simply do. And the stronger it is, the more everything around it orbits in alignment. Men are drawn in not because they are weak, but because their psychology is designed to seek certainty, to follow strength, to lean towards stability. Yet there is a deeper lesson here. Confidence is not only attractive, it is contagious. When a man encounters it, he begins to reflect it. He wants to rise to the same level, to match the energy, to prove himself worthy of standing in its presence. This is how relationships, partnerships, and even societies are elevated. Confidence in one person becomes fuel for confidence in another. It sparks growth, ambition, and discipline. But there is also a warning. Confidence can be faked, and men who fall for the illusion may wake up trapped in manipulation. Real confidence uplifts. It does not crush. It builds. It does not diminish. The test is simple. Does it inspire you to become better, or does it strip you of who you are? The answer will reveal whether you are in the presence of true strength or empty performance. For men, the takeaway is clear. If you find yourself drawn to confidence, do not see it as a threat. See it as a challenge. Let it push you to build your own, because the greatest gift of encountering strength in another is the chance to awaken it within yourself. For women, the message is equally powerful. The world notices not when you demand attention, but when you stand in quiet certainty. Your value is not proven by shouting. It is proven by knowing, by living, by being aligned with who you are. Confidence is the invisible crown. It cannot be stolen. It cannot be borrowed. It cannot be faked for long. It is earned, it is lived, and once it is truly yours, it makes you unforgettable. And this is why men are powerless in its presence, not because they lose themselves, but because they recognize in it the truth they are chasing within themselves. Strength alone can intimidate. Nurture alone can comfort. But when both are combined, they create something far more powerful. Influence that feels unshakable. Men are not drawn only to force nor only to gentleness. They are drawn to the rare balance of both. Because inside every man is a dual need. The need to respect strength and the need to feel cared for. When those two needs meet in one presence, the effect is undeniable. Think about this. Strength without compassion feels cold, and nurture without firmness feels weak. But together, they form the balance every human being searches for. This is why men often find themselves powerless in front of women who embody this rare combination. They sense safety, but they also sense challenge. They feel cared for, yet they also feel called to rise. And this balance strikes directly at the core of human psychology. Men are wired to seek respect. It is not just a desire. It is a deep psychological need. When they see strength in someone, it triggers admiration. They cannot ignore it. But men also carry vulnerability, whether they admit it or not. Beneath the armor, beneath the roles they play, there is a longing to be understood, to be accepted, to be cared for. Nurture answers that need. When these two forces come together, the result is irresistible. This balance is not loud. It does not demand. It simply exists in harmony. Strength shows in boundaries, in clarity, in discipline. Nurture shows in empathy, in warmth, in patience. Together, they create a gravitational pull. Men feel it not in their logic, but in their instincts. They lean in because something within them knows this balance is rare and deeply necessary. Psychology explains why. Human beings thrive on duality. Too much force creates resistance. Too much softness creates complacency. But when both coexist, growth becomes possible. In relationships, this principle is especially powerful. Men who encounter it often feel both grounded and challenged. They feel safe enough to be vulnerable, but also inspired enough to grow stronger. This paradox, comfort and challenge at once, is the essence of transformative influence. History has shown us countless examples. Leaders who achieved greatness often stood beside someone who embodied this balance. It was not just strength that guided them, nor just compassion. It was the combination that sharpened their vision while giving them resilience. Men fought harder, worked longer, and dreamed bigger, not only because they wanted to prove themselves, but because they felt supported as they did. But let's bring it back to the personal level. Imagine a man who carries the weight of the world on his shoulders. He faces competition, responsibility, and doubt every day. If he meets only strength, he feels judged. If he meets only nurture, he feels unchallenged. But when he meets both, he feels seen. He feels respected for his potential and cared for in his struggle. That balance doesn't weaken him. It awakens him. And this is where the true power lies. Men who experience this kind of presence often surrender without realizing it. They are not surrendering in defeat, but in trust. Trust that allows them to drop their guard, to open themselves, to become more than they were before. Because deep inside, every man longs for a place where he can be both strong and vulnerable. The balance of strength and nurture provides exactly that. But there is also a responsibility that comes with this power. Because influence, when held without awareness, can become control. Strength without compassion becomes domination. Nurture without strength becomes manipulation. The balance must be rooted in integrity. Otherwise, what could inspire growth may instead breed dependence. For men, the lesson is simple yet powerful. Recognize this pull, but do not lose yourself in it. Let it challenge you. Let it nurture you, but use it as fuel to build your own balance. Because the greatest strength a man can achieve is not found in resistance, but in learning to embody the same harmony. Firm yet kind, strong yet compassionate. And for women, the message is profound. The most powerful influence is not in choosing one or the other, but in living both. To stand firm in conviction, yet gentle in understanding. To hold boundaries, yet extend grace. This is the balance that not only draws men in, but elevates everyone it touches. This is why men find themselves powerless before women who live this truth. They are not defeated, they are awakened. They are not diminished, they are expanded. And in that awakening lies the possibility of transformation. Because when strength and nurture meet, lives are reshaped. Men rise higher, women stand stronger, and the world itself is changed by the quiet but unstoppable force of balance. Powerlessness is not always a sign of weakness. Sometimes it is the natural response to something greater than reason, something that bypasses the mind and reaches the core of human nature. Men often feel powerless in front of women who carry strength, nurture, confidence, and balance because these qualities strike at the deepest levels of their psychology. They do not just see these qualities, they feel them. And when they feel them, instinct takes over. To understand why this happens, we must first recognize how men are wired. Every man carries a longing for significance. He wants to matter. He wants to be respected, admired, and valued. This is not arrogance, it is human psychology. But alongside this drive for significance lies another truth. Every man carries vulnerability. He wrestles with doubt, with fear of failure, with the silent question, am I enough? These questions often remain hidden, buried under layers of pride and responsibility. But they are always there. When a man meets someone who reflects strength and nurture together, who radiates confidence and order, it awakens both sides of his nature at once. On one hand, he feels admiration, even awe. On the other, he feels exposed. He senses both his potential and his shortcomings. That dual effect is what makes him feel powerless, because it strips away the illusion of control. He is not in charge of what he feels. His instincts are. Psychology calls this the conflict between the conscious and the unconscious. Consciously, a man may tell himself he is independent, in control, unaffected, but unconsciously his brain is receiving signals that bypass logic. The warmth of nurture activates his need for safety. The firmness of strength activates his respect for authority. The confidence signals certainty. The harmony signals peace. Together, these cues form a language older than words, a language his biology cannot ignore. This is why men often describe the experience as overwhelming. They may not understand why they are drawn, why they feel compelled, why their thoughts circle back again and again. But the reason is simple. Their unconscious has taken the lead. And once the unconscious is engaged, resistance becomes nearly impossible. But here is the deeper truth. This powerlessness is not defeat. It is transformation waiting to happen. When a man feels powerless in this way, it is not because he is broken, but because something inside him is being awakened. He sees in that presence what he longs for within himself. He feels the challenge to rise, the call to grow, the push to step into his higher potential. What feels like powerlessness is actually the first step toward strength if he chooses awareness. Yet, without awareness, this same pull can become dangerous. A man may surrender too completely, giving away his sense of direction, his purpose, his vision. He may confuse admiration with dependence, comfort with escape. This is the shadow side of powerlessness. It can inspire growth, or it can trap. The difference lies in choice. This is why awareness is everything. To understand why the pull exists is to reclaim freedom. Men who recognize the forces at play can honor them without being enslaved by them. They can admire without losing themselves. They can be inspired without being consumed. Powerlessness turns into empowerment when it becomes conscious. For women, this truth also carries responsibility. The influence that awakens men is not a toy, not a tool to exploit. It is a gift. And like all gifts, it must be held with care. To awaken greatness in another is a sacred act. To manipulate it is to destroy not only the man, but also the bond of trust that makes true influence possible. So why do men feel powerless? Because the qualities that draw them, strength, nurture, confidence, harmony, speak to both their longing and their fear. They see what they want to be, and they see what they are not yet. They feel safety and they feel challenge. They experience inspiration and exposure all at once. And that cocktail of emotions leaves them unable to walk away. But this is not the end of the story. Powerlessness is not permanent. It is the opening of a door. It is the moment when the old defenses fall and something greater can be built. Men who recognize this moment can use it as fuel, as the spark that drives them to discipline, to vision, to strength of their own. The truth is simple but profound. Men are not powerless because they are weak. They are powerless because they are human. They are wired to respond to certain signals. And when those signals are present, instinct overrides logic. But in that very moment lies the chance for growth. Because when a man chooses to see clearly, to embrace awareness, and To rise beyond instinct, he transforms powerlessness into purpose. And that is the real secret. The influence that makes men powerless is also the influence that can make them great. It all depends on how they respond. Every great force in life carries two sides. Fire can warm, but it can also destroy. Water can give life, but it can also drown. Power works in the same way. The influence that awakens men, the very qualities that inspire them, can also break them if used without wisdom. And this is the shadow side of power, when what was meant to lift becomes a weapon that traps. When a man feels powerless, as we have seen, he stands at a crossroads. That feeling can push him to grow, to face himself, to rise into strength, but it can also blind him. It can make him dependent, vulnerable to manipulation, unable to see clearly. And here is the hard truth. Not every influence seeks to build. Some influences seek to control. Some seek to drain. And men who remain unaware can lose themselves entirely in the process. Psychology teaches us about the danger of projection. When a man admires qualities in someone else, he often projects onto them the very things he lacks. He sees strength, and he imagines salvation. He feels nurture, and he imagines unconditional safety. He believes that the other person can complete him, fill his voids, erase his fears. This is the illusion. And illusions are dangerous because they place power outside of the self. When power is placed outside of the self, dependence is born. A man no longer acts from his own vision, but from the pull of someone else's presence. He forgets his own direction. He bends his choices, his goals, even his values, not because he truly believes in them, but because he fears losing the connection. This is not growth. This is captivity. The shadow side of power is subtle. It does not always look like domination. Sometimes it looks like comfort. Sometimes it feels like care. But underneath it is pulling strings, guiding actions, limiting freedom. And the man under its influence often does not see it until much later, when he realizes how far he has drifted from his true path. But we must be clear, the shadow is not inevitable. Power only becomes destructive when it is held without integrity. A woman who understands her influence and uses it with wisdom does not need to control. She inspires, she supports, she challenges, but she never enslaves. The difference is simple. True power builds, false power consumes. Her history offers us countless warnings. Leaders destroyed not by enemies, but by the influence of those closest to them. Men who traded purpose for pleasure, discipline for comfort, vision for attachment. Entire empires have fallen, not by external attack, but by the internal weakness born of misplaced influence. The lesson is clear. When power is used without wisdom, it leads not to greatness, but to downfall. For men, this truth demands awareness. To admire influence is natural. To be moved by it is human. But to surrender blindly is dangerous. The key is not to resist power, but to recognize its shadow. Ask yourself, does this influence make me smaller, or does it make me greater? Does it lead me toward discipline or away from it? Does it build my vision or replace it with another's? The answers reveal whether you are standing in light or trapped in shadow. For women, the responsibility is equally profound. Influence is a gift that carries weight. When used carelessly, it can harm not only the man, but also the one who wields it, because power without integrity eventually collapses. Manipulation may achieve control for a moment, but it never builds trust. And without trust, true connection cannot exist. The shadow side of power teaches us that influence is not neutral. It always moves in one direction, toward growth or toward destruction. This is why integrity matters. This is why awareness matters. Because when influence is guided by wisdom, it awakens greatness. When it is guided by selfishness, it awakens destruction. And here lies the deeper lesson. Power is never just about one person. It always affects both. When influence uplifts, both rise. When it manipulates, both fall. The shadow side of power does not only weaken men, it weakens the bond between people. It weakens trust. It weakens the very foundation of growth. So the challenge is clear. For men, do not be blind to the forces shaping you. Do not confuse comfort with growth or control with care. Learn to see the difference. For women, wield influence with integrity, knowing that its purpose is not to enslave, but to awaken. The light and the shadow will always exist side by side, but it is the choice of how power is used that determines whether it becomes a force of creation or destruction. Men may feel powerless in its presence, but awareness transforms that powerlessness into strength. And Strength guided by wisdom can never be broken. If you want to see the truth about power, look at nature. Look at the lion. The lion is strong, but he is not the fastest nor the most clever. What makes him the king is his balance of confidence and restraint. He does not waste energy chasing everything he sees. He waits, he chooses, and when he acts with full force. But even the lion can fall if he allows his instincts to be blinded. A lion distracted by weakness will not survive the jungle. Nature whispers this truth: strength without awareness is fragile. The eagle teaches another lesson. The eagle soars above storms, not because the storm disappears, but because it rises higher to avoid being consumed by it. It uses the winds that frighten others to carry itself upward. Influence in life works the same way. It can either be the storm that destroys or the wind that lifts you higher. What determines the outcome is not the power of the storm, but the awareness of the one facing it. History repeats the same truth. Think of great civilizations. Rome did not collapse because of one enemy at the gate. It collapsed because of internal corruption, because discipline was replaced by comfort, because power was abused and not guided by wisdom. What destroyed it was not the sword of an invader, but the blindness of its own leaders. Influence, when unchecked, always leads to downfall. Men through history have faced this same test. Some rose because they learned to master the forces pulling at them. Others fell because they surrendered blindly. Think of leaders who stood firm, who listened to wise counsel, yet never abandoned their own vision. They used influence as fuel, not as chains. But think also of leaders who were seduced by promises of ease, pleasure, or validation. Their names are written in the chapters of failure, not because they lacked strength, but because they lacked discipline. This is why human psychology is clear. When we admire something deeply, we risk losing our balance. We risk giving too much weight to the outside and not enough to the inside. That is why awareness is everything. To admire is natural, to respect is noble, but to surrender blindly is to invite destruction. Consider the story of Achilles, one of the greatest warriors in Greek mythology. Invincible in battle, yet brought down not by armies, but by his one blind spot, his heel. That single weakness defined his fate. In the same way, men's admiration for powerful influence can be both their strength and their weakness. Admiration can push them to rise, but if left unchecked, it can expose the very heel that brings them down. The lesson of history and nature is not to avoid influence, but to master it. The river does not resist the current. It learns to flow with it. The tree does not fight the wind. It grows stronger roots to withstand it. The eagle does not fear the storm. It uses it to climb higher. And in the same way, men must not fear powerful influence. They must face it with awareness, with discipline, with inner strength. When you study the rise and fall of great men, you notice a pattern. Those who endured were not the ones who denied influence, but the ones who learned to channel it. They took the admiration they felt and used it to sharpen their own vision. They allowed the pull of influence to refine them, not consume them. And that is the choice every man faces. Will you let influence make you smaller, or will you use it to become greater? Nature never rewards blindness. The animal that ignores the predator does not survive. The tree that grows without deep roots falls in the storm. The civilization that indulges without discipline collapses. And the man who follows influence without awareness loses himself. Life has always made this clear. Those who endure are those who stay awake. So look at the patterns. Look at the lions, the eagles, the rivers, the storms. Look at Rome. Look at Greece. Look at the empires of the past. The message echoes through time. Strength must be balanced with wisdom, and influence must be balanced with awareness. Without this balance, even the greatest fall. With it, even the smallest can rise to greatness. This is why the powerless feeling men experience is not the end of the story. It is the beginning. Because in that powerlessness lies a choice to remain blind or to open your eyes, to drift with the storm or to rise above it, to collapse like Rome, or to endure like the lion who knows his place in the jungle. The examples are everywhere, in nature and in history, waiting to be learned. And the question is not whether influence exists. It always will. The question is whether you will master it or let it master you. Every man eventually reaches a crossroads. One path is easy. It is the path of surrender, of comfort, of drifting wherever influence pushes him. The other path is hard. It is the path of discipline, of awareness, of self-mastery. And in that choice lies the destiny of a man's life. Think about it. How many people never rise because they never choose the harder road? They allow their emotions, their desires, and the influence of others to shape them completely. They want to be admired. They want to be loved. They want to be accepted. And in that hunger, they forget to become someone who can stand alone. But the truth is simple. The man who cannot stand alone will never stand tall. Self-mastery begins in silence. It begins when you face yourself honestly. No distractions, no masks, no lies, or just you, your weaknesses, your fears, and your potential. Most people run from this confrontation because it feels uncomfortable. But discomfort is the birthplace of growth. If you run from it, you run from your own greatness. If you face it, you unlock a strength that no outside force can break. Human psychology shows us that habits shape destiny. A man who controls his habits controls his life. Small disciplines, waking up early, pushing through resistance, choosing growth over ease. These are not just actions. They are declarations. They tell the world, I am not a prisoner of influence. I am the master of myself. And once you master yourself, no one can truly master you. The danger of influence is strongest when your inner foundation is weak. If you lack clarity, you are pulled in every direction. If you lack purpose, you are owned by whatever promises comfort or pleasure. But the moment you decide to build a strong foundation within yourself, influence loses its grip. Why? Because your identity is no longer negotiable. You no longer chase approval. You live by conviction. Look at the greatest warriors of history. They were not the strongest because of their weapons, but because of their minds. Their discipline made them untouchable. Their inner code made them impossible to corrupt. That is why the most dangerous man is not the one with power in his hands, but the one with power over himself. So ask yourself, who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when the noise fades and you are left alone with your thoughts? That is where self-mastery begins. It is not about impressing the world. It is about conquering the hidden battles inside your own heart. Temptation will always exist. Influence will always surround you. But the man who has disciplined his mind does not fall easily. He sees through illusion. He knows that pleasure without purpose is poison. He knows that admiration without strength is empty. And because he knows this, he walks a different path. He is not easily swayed, not easily broken, not easily controlled. Self-mastery is not perfection. It is progress. It is the daily act of rising again when you fall. It is the refusal to let weakness define you. It is the decision to keep building, even when the world tempts you to tear yourself down. And with each choice, with each act of discipline, you build a version of yourself that influence cannot defeat. The powerless man sees influence as chains. The disciplined man sees it as a test. And through this test, he becomes stronger. Just as fire purifies gold, challenges purify the soul. Every moment of temptation is an opportunity. Every moment of doubt is a doorway. The man who walks through with courage is not the same man who entered. He leaves stronger, sharper, freer. And freedom is the ultimate reward of self-mastery. Freedom from fear, freedom from manipulation, freedom from the endless cycle of chasing validation. When you master yourself, you no longer need the world to define your worth. You carry your worth within you. And that kind of man is unshakable. The world will always test you. Influence will always surround you. But if you have built strength within, you cannot be broken from without. That is the path to self-mastery. It is not easy. It is not quick, but it is the only path that leads to true power. Strength has always been misunderstood. Too often people think it means domination, control, or the ability to force others into submission. But true strength is something far greater. True strength is not about conquering others. It is about conquering yourself so deeply that nothing outside of you can shake the ground you stand on. The man who has built himself on discipline, conviction, and purpose does not need to prove his strength by overpowering others. His presence alone is proof. His calm in the storm, his ability to remain steady when others crumble. That is the mark of a man who has risen above weakness, because strength is not in the noise. It is in the silence. It is in the unshakable confidence of knowing who you are and what you stand for. A man like this cannot be manipulated. He cannot be baited into foolish battles. He cannot be swayed by empty promises. Why? Because he has already fought the hardest battle, the one within himself. When you win the inner war, the outer world loses its power over you. That is why so many appear powerful but collapse when tested. They built their strength on appearance, not foundation. True strength is different. It is quiet but undeniable. It does not shout, yet it commands respect. And it is precisely this strength that makes a man immune to the influences that trap others. When a man rises in true strength, admiration no longer blinds him. Desire no longer chains him. Approval no longer controls him. He sees through it all because his strength does not come from outside. It comes from within. Psychology shows us something fascinating. People are drawn to those who carry this kind of strength. It is not arrogance. It is not pride. It is certainty. Humans naturally gravitate towards certainty because it offers safety and direction. That is why leaders rise above crowds, not because they are the loudest, but because they are the most stable. And this stability is born from strength of character, not from the illusion of control. Think of it. When chaos breaks out, who do people look to? Not the one who panics, not the one who shouts the loudest, but the one who remains steady, the one who stays clear-headed, the one who refuses to break. That is the power of true strength. It is not about bending the world to your will. It is about becoming the kind of man the world cannot bend. This kind of strength cannot be faked. You cannot pretend discipline. You cannot pretend conviction. You cannot pretend self-mastery. These are earned through sacrifice, through patience, through the daily grind of choosing growth over comfort. That is why men who rise in true strength are rare, because few are willing to pay the price, but those who do are transformed into something remarkable. Men who cannot be bought, men who cannot be broken, men who cannot be ignored. And here lies the paradox. When a man no longer needs admiration, he receives it. When he no longer craves power, he gains it. When he no longer fears loss, he becomes free. This is why true strength is magnetic. It cannot be denied because it is real. It is built on principles, on values, on discipline, not on the fragile approval of others. The powerless man is always chasing validation, chasing comfort, chasing recognition. The strong man is always building character, building resilience, building a foundation so solid that nothing can shake it. And in the end, the builder always outlasts the chaser, because what is built from within will always outlive what is borrowed from the outside. So ask yourself, do you want temporary influence or lasting strength? Do you want to be a man blown by the winds of circumstance, or a man who stands like a mountain, immovable, unshaken, unbreakable? Because the truth is this: the world does not respect the man who is easily swayed. It respects the man who rises, stands firm, and lives by a code that nothing can corrupt. True strength is not given. It is forged. It is earned through struggle, through sacrifice, through countless moments of choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. And when you rise with this strength, you no longer fear influence. You transcend it. You no longer seek validation. You embody it. And in that transformation, you discover what it means to live with real power. The rise of true strength is not just a personal victory, it's a revolution of the soul. It is the moment a man stops being controlled by the world and begins to shape the world instead. That is the man who leaves a legacy. That is the man who cannot be forgotten. That is the man who rises above weakness and shows others the way.